not having access to finance is so damaging to any community that it will actually lead to kufr eventually. Because one of the things that the Prophet ﷺ feared for us was poverty. I have to tell you the truth. The truth is we have to solve those fundamental problems. So Islamic finance for me now is, what resources do we have? How can we channel those resources to solve the fundamental problems of society? And that might not be setting up an Islamic home finance company. That might not be setting up an Islamic bank. It might be working within the ribawi framework for a while to solve those fundamental problems.
I never thought I'd hear you say that.
Yeah, this is a very different Sheikh Salman.
I used to be much more strident in my criticism of Islamic banks and sort of the whole debt-based Islamic finance model. And I'm tired of it. And I'm sure other people are tired of my complaining. and we're all hitting our heads on the wall, right? And I've just decided to stop doing that, where we've got a type of jealousy within even Islamic finance and fintechs, where, and you said it to me, you met somebody who said, I'm going to kill the competition.
Capture or kill the competition.
Capture or kill. All right.
Yes.
Now, is that a real person saying, is that a real incident?
That's a
real person in the UK, right? So we don't have to name names, but it's important to bring this out because...
But you obviously, in your background, went from Shariah to the law, I suppose, in having studied Sharia for many years in Syria, and then coming back and becoming an Islamic finance lawyer.
I think it all came out of a big trauma. It was my trauma response. And I'm going to be open about it. And she burst into tears and left. She left. I never saw her again.
Wow.
I saw her again a few times on the street, and she crossed the road and avoided me. And I've never been able to say sorry to that person.
Well, now's your chance. She's here today. No, I'm joking.
No. Well, if you're listening, I'm really sorry because...
Before we begin, we notice only about 20% of you are subscribed to the podcast. So if you like what you're listening to and you want to hear more from us, then please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, or leaving us a comment or a review wherever you are listening to this, because it really does help people to find us. Thank you, and back to the show. In today's episode, we are honored to be joined by Sheikh Salman Hasan, Sharia scholar, Islamic finance lawyer, and of course the co-founder of Widen, a fellow Islamic fintech that is revolutionizing Islamic home ownership in the UK. We'll talk about his journey through scholarship, law, and entrepreneurship, and how Islamic mortgages work, and what Widen is doing to build something truly unique, as well as what the future holds for this industry as a whole. As always, I'm your host, Areeb Siddiqui, but you might notice, for those of you who are watching, that I am rejoined by a relatively familiar face, my brother, Ali Siddiqui.
Thank you, everybody, for having me again. Yes, honoured to be here in the presence of Sheikh Salman. I have been on the podcast before, but I felt this one was a particularly apt episode in which to make my reappearance, not least because I'm also a lawyer and have studied to some extent Sharia, as well as Arabic, of course, which Sheikh Salman has been quite foundational in implementing. So we can get on to that, but without further ado.
That intro is probably a little bit too long, but it's okay. We're your hosts, and this is Muslim Money Talk. Sheikh Salman, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the show. It's been a very long time coming.
It has. I've wondered why you haven't invited me.
We have.
I'm joking.
We had your co-founder Raza on.
You have.
It's one of our most popular episodes. It was episode number 14.
Yeah. The truth is, I've actually been hiding, so I like to just keep my head down and out of the way.
Out of the way, but alhamdulillah, we managed to get you. We had a fantastic conversation with your co-founder about 10 or so months ago, where we talked about his perspective, coming from actuarial sciences, how inspiration struck him, and of course how he met you and then formed Widen. But we'd love to hear your perspective as the Sharia scholar, the head of legal, and your own journey towards things as well. But I think the reason we managed to, alhamdulillah, get you onto this is that you and I were actually hosting a roundtable a couple of weeks ago for a newly formed student-led organization called Ethic, which is all about helping students to build careers and seek out entrepreneurial opportunities in ethical and Islamic finance. So shout out to Laiba and to Omar Khalil for that fantastic organization. And Sheikh Salman and I were placed together to hold a roundtable. And you said something to me which really struck a chord with me, and I just thought immediately, we have to get you onto the podcast. And you said, despite studying Sharia for decades, it was only a few months ago that you felt that your understanding of the framework for Sharia had been fundamentally transformed through an experience that you had. So I'd love to open with just asking you, what was that experience, and what is your framework for thinking about Sharia?
Around last year, I was really thinking deeply about myself and where my life had led me. I'm in my mid-40s now and probably lived half of my life. So I was really thinking about whether all of this study and knowledge that I'd sought to acquire over my life had transformed me. Because that's what we're all really seeking. We're searching for transformation, searching for God, really. In everything we do, we're looking for our Creator. And I actually felt that that it hadn't transformed me. It, in some ways, probably made me more proud and arrogant.
Really?
I think so, because this is the risk and danger of seeking knowledge without purification. So if you do ta'allum, learning, without tazkiyah, without purification, it's a bit like living life without showering. So after a day, you're going to start smelling, and after a few days, you'll smell like a grave. And we often do this with knowledge. We just keep pursuing knowledge, and there's lots of activity and sweat from that knowledge, and we smell, but we don't realize because we don't have a parallel path of tazkiyah or purification. And so I had this sort of personal, you might call it a crisis, or just a deep search and deep thought late last year. There were other events that happened in my life that precipitated that. And I was looking, and one day somebody said to me, "Why don't you go to this place? You'll find what you're looking for there." It sounds a bit like sort of a line from The Alchemist from the book or a Hollywood movie. So it was slightly dramatic. And that event was happening the next day. And so I went to that event, and then things cascaded and precipitated from there. But really what I wanted to talk about was how this shifted my framework, and actually I feel created a very deep spiritual shift inside me, which I've felt ever since. I feel like my life has completely transformed. Wow. And it's changed like never before.
And just so the viewers are clear, you're someone who's been studying Sharia since university days. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
You traveled to Damascus to learn Arabic. And despite all of that, you ended up in this place where you felt unfulfilled, and you even felt that, you were being led down the wrong path. I just want to understand. Can I dig into that a little bit?
This is the case with many people who've pursued knowledge, and there are many people out there who are scholars and who are sheikhs who suffer in silence. Because the next day when I went to this event, the sheikh who was presenting, every single word he said struck my heart. And I was just completely in tears because I just felt this is exactly what I need. This is what I've been looking for all my life. And I went over to him afterwards. And it transpired that 25 years earlier, he'd studied at my Arabic Institute with one of my students. Wow. And I didn't teach him directly, but I introduced the first class. So we'd met. And he's quite a well-known person. We can talk about him later. But the point I want to make is he had the same experience 2 years prior to that, which led him to come to the same place. And then I later found out that a lot of my friends from university, some of them a year before, some of them 10 years before, had the same crisis. And they'd all been led through guidance, sometimes direct guidance through dream or through meanings implanted in their heart through experience to the same place. And there's one particular person who's a good sort of 10, 15 years younger than me, went to the same university. He did Umrah. And a lot of us go to Umrah thinking Umrah will transform us. A lot of us think if I read more Islamic literature, if I watch more Islamic YouTube videos, I'm going to be transformed. What often happens is you get euphoria. You get an emotional uplift. And then like any emotional uplift, there's a down. And then and sometimes it can be depressive and often addictive. Some of us use religion as a medication for whatever problems we're going through religious dopamine. We've all been there, right?
For sure.
And so you get a high and then you get a low, and that actually doesn't transform you. In fact, that can be dangerous and cause you to actually commit more sins, because when you're in a low, you're vulnerable, and shaitan can give you waswasa, and your nafs gives you waswasa, and so you need something to medicate your feelings. And so I'd felt that my religious journey had been surface level, and I hadn't had a deep internal spiritual transformation. What really transformed me was a reframing of how I think about the universe. I think before I had what I'd call a transactional way of thinking about things. And I thought that if during my life I build up my portfolio of good deeds, it's like a portfolio attitude. And then on the day of judgment, I'm going to exchange that portfolio with God for paradise.
Yeah.
It's very transactional. And that sort of vocabulary and way of thinking, it laces everything we talk about in religion. People talk about, oh, do that, there is reward for it. So we're reward seeking, like we're rent seeking in terms of spiritual rent. We want to get some rent for our energy and our time. And that is fundamentally wrong. That's not how Allah is and how He expects us to be. So the way this is reframed is that in the beginning, you go back to the beginning of the journey of man, before even creation was created, there was just Allah. And Allah existed with His that, which is His essence, and His sifat, which is His attributes, His names and attributes. And Allah so loved Himself. So Allah is al-Wadud. He loved Himself, and so out of that love, He created creation out of wood. And then the most loving thing he could give to creation was Himself, because He is so immense and perfect and eternal. And so out of His love, He shared Himself with us in two key ways, in many, many ways, but in two key ways. The first key way is that He enabled us to have a relationship with Him. And that's amazing, because how can something finite have a relationship with something that's infinite? You'd think that chasm can't be bridged. But Allah, out of His love and His mercy, enabled us to have a relationship with Him and to know Him. And that's called ma'rifah. And ma'rifah is, I didn't used to understand what ma'rifah meant. I thought that it's sort of spiritual enlightenment or awakening. Like if you do dhikr and meditate for 10 years, 20 years in a cave somewhere, one day a bolt of lightning will hit you, and wow, now you are enlightened, and you know, it's sort of like the Zen movies, right?
Yeah, it's like a kind of a Buddhist concept. So,
I used to think that, you know, if I keep doing this, and it was unreachable, because I just thought, I just can't do that. I just can't do that kind of rigor. And so those were the legends of the past who had ma'rifah. You know, I'm going to coast through my life at a surface level, and I sort of resigned to my fate in my 40s, thinking, this is it. You know, how am I ever going to become a friend of Allah? How am I going to have ma'rifah? And what I've realized is actually ma'rifah is a relational thing. It's knowing someone through interaction and relationship. And Allah, out of His love, has taught us how to know Him by teaching us how to know each other. And so if I want to love my parents, the easiest thing to do is to think about what they've done for me. So I can imagine, when I was 5, my father picked me up, or my mum picked me up, and they gave me a sweetie and they hugged me, and I have that memory and that fills me with love. We all have this, right? And in that interaction, that relationship, Allah is teaching us how to love Him. Because otherwise we wouldn't know, it'd be too abstract. So the first thing is He's enabled us to love Him and know Him. So the second thing He's done is He has enabled us, and this is amazing, He's enabled us to reflect His own attributes. So Allah is loving, we're also loving, we can love. Allah is merciful, we have the capacity to be merciful. So much so that everything that we do should really be a reflection of one of Allah's attributes. And so now, our akhlaq, for me now, before akhlaq for me was, right, I need to scrape around the Quran and Hadith and Islamic literature and find all the things that tell me to be good. And that's a framework for ethics. Right? It's very volitional, it's almost self-reliant, because it relies on the human being to frame together what Islamic ethics are from the primary sources, right? Whereas actually, this totally overleaps that. And what we say is each of Allah's attributes is His nature, but when it cascades down and we are unable to reflect it, even in simple things like when we fast, we withhold ourselves from food, Allah doesn't eat. And so we're reflecting Allah's attribute of not eating. And so when we do that, Allah loves it. Inna Allaha jamilun yuhibbul jamal. Allah is beautiful, is the hadith. He loves beauty. And so when we embody beauty and ihsan, Allah loves us because we are like Him. Allah loves it when we act like Him. And the person who most acted like Him was the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He was that example of divine attributes reflected in human behavior. And that's why the Prophet said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I've only been sent, remember that, I've not been sent for halal and haram and law and Shariah and all of this edifice that we create and we think is so important. All of those things are actually secondary. The primary reason and the only reason I've been sent is to perfect human behavior, how we interact with each other. That's amazing. And this is embodied in many, many parts of the So I was familiar and exposed to this, but in fragments. And this Sheikh, he gave me an integrated framework, a theological framework, and then a moral ethical framework of behavior, and how those two connect directly and don't require me to scrape around and be self-reliant and try to discover what they are. So now every moment of my life, I simply think, which attribute of Allah am I witnessing now? And that points to Him. And which attribute of Allah can I reflect now so that it points to Him? So for example, Allah is, I'm going to bring this back to finance because it's relevant. Every single thing fits into this framework. So we know that if a person is in debt and they're finding it difficult to pay, the Islamic ethic is that you give them more time, right? And then I used to see this in a sterilized way. This is a rule of fiqh, right? It's a legal principle. And I'm really good at fiqh. I'm quite proud and arrogant about myself. I think I'm right often, most of the time, right? And so my wife knows this. So all of our wives know that about us, right? So, and we're all blessed that we have people in our lives who hold up a mirror to us so that we can see ourselves. And that's also part of Allah's mercy, that we can see where we are, who we are, so that we can then fix ourselves and correct, or ask Allah to correct ourselves. So the ethic is to give them more time. But where does that come from? That doesn't exist in a vacuum, because Allah is al-halim and as-sabur. Those are two really important attributes. So Allah is so forbearing, and we use the word forbearance in the context of debt and finance in human language. But Allah is so forbearing, He's so sabur, that He's even forbearing to shaitan, Iblis. He gave him time. And Iblis knew that when he asks Allah, when he disobeyed Him, he knew that when he asks Him, أنظرني إلى يوم يبعثون, forbear with me until the day that they are raised on the day of judgment. He knew that Allah would give because he had ma'rifah, he knew Allah, he had a relationship with Him. He didn't have ikhlas, he didn't have sincerity, but he had a relationship with Allah, and he knew if I ask Him now, He'll give. And that's the meaning of relation. When the child knows, when I ask my dad or my mum, I know how to ask so that they give. Like my 9-year-old, a few years ago, she was teaching her older siblings how to get something out of daddy, right? And so she was like, you have to go up to him, to look up at him like this, daddy. And, the voice, she did the voice. And so she has ma'rifah of her father. So that's what I mean by ma'rifah. It's totally relational.
Yes.
And in that experience of seeing her, knowing how to melt my heart and get what she wants out of me, I can learn how to ask Allah. Of course, not in the same way. But in reality, we're all children before God. So we're all impoverished. We have nothing to offer to Allah. So it's really Allah who's giving to us. We're not giving Allah anything. So going back to the framework very quickly. So here, the principle that we give people more time comes straight down as an ethic, comes straight down from Allah's attribute as-sabur, right? And so I don't need any other intermediary framework to understand that, and that way that connects me directly to Allah in every moment of my life.
Wow. And this has helped you get away from the transactional aspect, because I think so many of us see our deen as transactional. It's something I've thought about, I've discussed with other people as well. As I think the way I've reasoned with that is that human beings are inherently transactional to an extent. I think deep down we're always looking at, okay, how do I benefit? How do me doing this? Perhaps there are some relationships where that is not the case, like that between a mother and a child, right? Or like, why would a mother undergo childbirth, one of the most painful experiences, for the sake of a child that then is a huge burden to them. Like psychologically it doesn't make sense, but in general most cases people are transactional. But your response to that is that this is, rather than just seeking out reward for the reward itself, it should be you trying to emulate godlike qualities.
Yes, exactly. And that's the meaning of Rabbani,
right?
Lordly, godly. So our objective, when Allah says I will create a Khalifa upon the earth, Khalifa, the word Khalifa comes from khalf, and Ali will know about this, behind. So Khalifa is really someone you leave behind to represent you when you're absent.
Oh, I
Right?
see.
So your deputy, your representative. Right?
Yeah.
Now, so obviously Allah doesn't leave anything behind. So it's in relation to Allah, what it means is He's going to send a representative upon the earth.
Yeah.
What does a representative do? So if I'm, suppose, a generous person, and framing it within ethics again, I'm a generous person, suppose, and I want someone to take my money, go to the next town, and represent me there, i.e. distribute that money to the people in need, and reflect my generosity. That's the meaning of Khalifa. Right. So then our responsibility upon that, we often translate Khalifa as steward. I don't think the word steward really explains it. Whereas really here what we're doing is representing Allah by embodying, or we can't embody, by reflecting His attributes in our interactions with each other. That's really our purpose. So it's really important to understand that purpose. That's the purpose. There are other things called motivations. Yeah, Allah gives us incentives and motivations because that's how He created us in our nature, right? And we are reward driven. Allah's created us like that, and He does have reward. But it's really important to separate purpose and objective from motivation. So, for example, Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran, he says, "Rabbi arini kayfa tuhyi al-mawta." My Lord, show me how you bring the dead back to life. And Allah says, "Awalam tu'min?" Don't you believe? Am I not your objective, your purpose? Aren't you already with me? Why do you need to see this? Don't you believe it? And he says, Bala, of course. وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. But just so my heart can rest. So I just want to see it. Right? Like the disciples of Isa. Can your Lord bring a table down of food from the sky? Of course He can. They know that. Right? They just want to feast. They said, we want to eat. Because we're motivated by human needs. So
their own personal curiosity.
That's right. So long as we separate that, make those secondary, those motivations are fine. But the moment we bring them and make them the primary motivation, that leads to a subtle form of shirk, because we're now, our objective is something else other than Allah. You see, and suppose you had a friend, and you had two friends, and one friend comes and visits you and loves you, and they just want you. They want you. And there's another friend, they're just after your money, right? They don't really want you. They pay lip service to the friendship. They say, I love you and I want to be in this, come and spend time with you. But every meeting they come to you, they're like, oh, can you lend me 100 quid? Right? Now, out of your generosity, you might just give them the 100 quid. All right? But they're not your real friend.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Whereas the other person, he might actually be in need. And he comes and he loves you and spends time with you. That's his primary motivation. But then when he's in need, he might ask you for 100 quid, and you'll give it, and you give it with love. But those are two very, very different relationships internally. Externally, they may look identical. So it's really important for us to understand, as creatures of God, how we need to frame or reframe our attitude towards God. And then that will then cascade back into everything in life, including finance. And we can then frame everything we discussed today within that framework.
Do you find your business journey, your entrepreneurial journey, what you're doing with Vida, as building that, was it marifah, that relationship with God? That's what you're trying to do now. Is that how basically my question is, has this framework changed the way you've approached business and approached Vida? Absolutely. Now again, it might not change what I do, because I could have been doing the right thing for slightly the wrong reason in the past. Now I'm going to carry on doing the right thing, that's my thought,
but with a different framework and for the right reason.
Gotcha.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of something that Iqbal Nasim said once, actually, which is in the context of reciting Quran. He said that the point of revelation is not to recite for reward, even though in its recitation there is reward, but that's not the point of it. And it's distinguishing between those two things, between incentive and objective, I think is what you're getting at, which I resonate with a lot.
And that totally changed how you approach the Quran. And I was with Iqbal last week, and he asked me, how has that changed your relationship with the Quran? And then that caused me to reflect afterwards. And before I was collecting points. I was saying, I'm going to read a juz, I'm going to tick a box, and it was almost perfunctory, right? Whereas now I know that even a single word or letter or verse of the Quran is more than enough to transform not just me but the whole of mankind, because it's the kalam of Allah. And so really what the Quran is just an ability for me to interface with Allah Himself and have a conversation with Him. And that can even be because the Quran is His speaking to us, it's His kalam. And we have this other concept of munajat, where we speak to Allah, and then that becomes a conversation, a muhadatha. And Allah in the Quran Himself says that فَاسْتَجَابَ لَهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ, that Allah, when we call upon Allah, Allah answers. that we need to take that literally.
Yeah.
Because the first port of call in interpretation is literal. Yeah. So we're all literalists at first instance, and then where the literal interpretation doesn't work, we then look for non-literal interpretations that make more sense.
Sure.
Right? But the literal meaning of this is Allah answers us. And if we believe that when we ask Allah, we get those answers in our heart and in our minds, we should not underestimate our thoughts and the feelings in our hearts here.
No, absolutely. And I guess this comes back to a question that I think we discussed with the Nisba guys a couple of weeks ago, which is a couple of episodes ago. Is this why it's so important that people are reading the Quran in a language they understand? As opposed to, a lot of us can read Arabic, but we don't fully understand that. So that you can build that relationship first. And then, of course, there's a reward in reading it in its original language. And I guess that also touches upon what you do as well, secondary, which is your Arabic school, and why you're so passionate about people learning Arabic itself. But would you recommend people who maybe don't understand the Quran, don't understand Arabic, they should read it in their own language first?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the example I give is if I were far away from my mother, suppose I'd never met my mother, one day I receive a letter from her, first letter from my mum, and I open it up and it's in Mandarin or Russian. I don't speak that language. Now I could get a translation of it, and that's my first first port of call, and so I can start interacting with what my mother's trying to say to me through translation. But my heart's going to yearn to know, what is she saying in her native tongue? I didn't realize my mother was Chinese or Russian, right? What is she really saying in her own language? You see? And so that yearning is a good thing, because really every yearning we have, whether that yearning is for something good or bad, even bad yearnings are actually a manifestation of our search for God. So for a very
even
quick
bad
example,
yearning?
Yeah. This is a reframing, because everything is every beauty, for example, is a reflection of God. Where did it come from? It doesn't come from nowhere. Allah is Jamil. So everything beautiful in the earth, that beauty emanates from Him. It's a reflection of His beauty, right? Now Allah has made certain beautiful things haram for us to look at,
Sure.
right? Because of His restrictions. It's not good for us. Allah is an-nafi'. He benefits us. So out of His benefit for us, He is also mani', al-mani', the one who withholds things because they're not good for us. Right? Everything Allah does for us is for our benefit, and therefore everything the Shariah should do, and this goes back to finance, should be for benefit. If it's not benefiting people, if it's causing hardship, it's not fulfilling the purpose, the ethical and the moral or the theological purpose. And so we have to reframe everything the Sharia into that framework. But going back to this, and I said this to Iqbal last week, if a young man looks at a woman who's beautiful, he finds beautiful, and objectifies her, that's haram. It's also against the law. You can get arrested for that. So you don't do that, either ethically, morally, or legally, right? But what is he really looking for? He's looking for God. He doesn't realize it. He's looking for divine beauty. And so with that person, you don't fight the yearning for beauty, because that's what Allah created instinctively in a person. You redirect it in a way that's halal, that Allah has made halal. And so what you say to those young people, look, is there something else that's beautiful you could redirect your attention to and use that to remember Allah?
Yeah.
You see? And so Allah has given us the ability to appreciate the beauty in nature and creation, because that points us to Him. And it's not a bad thing.
I think that's something a lot of us struggle with, because when you feel those feelings, whether it's lust or greed, what the Christians call the deadly sins, I think it's hard for us to associate that there might be something divine within that feeling. So okay, say the example that you mentioned, you see someone, you feel lust towards them, you might just think that's just a bodily function, that's like a weakness of mine, mentally or physically. Could you explain that a little bit more? Like, what is that?
Look, what is the worst creature in the universe? The devil.
Shaitan,
right? Amazingly, invoking his name for us is an act of worship. And you're shocked, right? We say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitan. We say shaitan, right?
Yes,
so you can take the worst, most disgusting thing on earth, and you turn it back to Allah, and it becomes an act of worship, becomes an act of surrender. Why? Because everything points to Allah. Even shaitan points to Allah. You see? So then if a person sees something they shouldn't be looking at, And we can look at with lust at anything. So if I look at someone else's car with lust and think, and I have a bit of jealousy, that's haram, right? In fact, in some ways, that's worse than objectifying a woman, because jealousy is a misdirection or me being dissatisfied with Allah's rizq to another person. I'm contending with God's decision. You see, whereas if a person objectifies a woman, that's just pure gratification. You see, I'm not undermining the authority of God. I'm just gratifying
and you're going
myself.
about it the wrong way. You're not making sincere prayer to God to, grant me
That's
a
right.
better
I'm
car
self-serving.
or something. Exactly.
So just pursuing carnal desire is self-serving.
Sure.
But being jealous of another human being who's been given something by Allah is actually subversive to God's authority. You see, it's more like a capital crime as opposed to just a normal crime. It's more serious. We don't realize this. It's much, much more serious. Theologically and ethically, it's much more serious. And it's an obnoxious disease of the heart.
Yeah.
Because, I'm dissatisfied firstly that God's given him that thing. I want him to have less and I want something more. But even worse than that is I don't want him to have it, nor do I want it. I mean, that's the worst kind of jealousy, you see. So, and we have this and we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago when we met, where we've got a type of jealousy within even Islamic finance and fintechs, where, and you said it to me, you met somebody who said, I'm going to kill the competition.
Capture or kill the competition.
Capture or kill. All right.
Yes.
Now, is that a real person saying, is that a real incident?
That's a
real person in the UK. Right. So we don't have to name names, but it's important to bring this out because, you see, that is a misdirection of our moral ethical framework, which comes down from misunderstanding our relationship with Allah. Not knowing who Allah is, not knowing what my purpose is. If I don't know those two things, I'm going to engage in industry, in politics, in finance. I'm going to engage in those things in a devilish way. I'm going to reflect the attributes of the devil. And so Islamic finance might jump through hoops and tick boxes, but it's not going to be very Islamic because my ethics are going to drive people away and land me in the dissatisfaction of God. What's the point?
Hey, assalamu alaikum. Before we continue, I really wanted to share a little bit about what Kestrl is and what we're doing. Kestrl is a fintech on a mission to help over 1 billion people to grow their wealth without compromising on their beliefs. And we're doing that by launching our very own digital bank later this year here in the UK. So if you'd like to, sign up and become one of our first 1,000 customers who'll get free access to all of our services for life. Please sign up through the link wherever you're listening to this podcast. Free access for life means access to features such as our Sharia compliant current account, savings products, investing into the likes of gold, crypto, stocks and shares, all of these features and more, but we're only making it available to the first 1,000 customers. So please check this out. It's not just about avoiding interest, it's about ensuring that our money is being used to do good in the world and not for all the things that banks are putting it towards, whether it's funding wars in the Middle East, pollution, housing crisis, what have you. So please sign up to Kestrl today. Thank you. Now back to the show. The spirit of the law is not being fulfilled, whereas the letter of it may seem to be. But spiritually, it's not really there.
Exactly.
And I think that's so dangerous because as an entrepreneur, people who are pursuing careers or looking for productivity tips, there's a wealth of information and knowledge out there, but from non-Muslim sources. So we've been through accelerator schemes and we consume things like Y Combinator's startup school content, which is all out there. And it gives you a framework, a blueprint for how to pursue business and how you should approach competition and how to reach out to the market. But I always sometimes stop myself because sometimes you get into it and you're like, yeah, this is how I need to be compared to my competitors. This is how I need to act. This is how I need to be as a CEO. And then I almost feel like there's an absent voice there as to, okay, but as a Muslim owner and trying to reframe how we are and our relationship with God, that's kind of missing at the moment.
That's right.
Yeah, it's just
so really we're adopting what you might call secular or
exactly.
Islamic framework
of
ethics. And so when we say we're Islamic, what do we mean by that?
Yeah.
How are we actually Islamic fundamentally?
It's like you're holding a boardroom meeting, you just step out the room to go pray and then you come back. And
That's
then
it.
You
So
go back
we're actually secular.
Yeah.
And this will inform everything we do. So if I, for example, own a shop and my brother or sister beside me has another shop, a stall, all right? And this can happen. This can happen because we have stalls in like fairs and conferences and conventions, right? So you might have another competitor fintech next door to you, right?
Yeah.
And somebody
We've
comes
been in that position many times.
Yeah, exactly. And the reality is, no, we're not in competition. Our rizq is written.
Yeah,
If you truly believe that when we were born, our rizq is written, you will not fear. And so if a customer comes to the next door stall and they're off praying or gone to the bathroom, what should I do? I should step over, sell their product, and then come back and not try to poach the customer because that customer turned up there, right? I was going to say, hey, come over here, right? You see, so why? Because I have itmi'nan. I have satisfaction. I'm settled because I know that everything is from Allah and my rizq is written.
But you go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, that I suppose that in a nutshell is what prophetic business is, or should be. Going back to the sources, as you say, the Prophet ﷺ. So I guess what we've been touching on is this relationship between theology and law, or the interaction between the two.
I would say even before that, theology and ethics, which I'll translate as akhlaq, behavior, which comes straight down. There's no interpolation, right? So Allah's attributes. His sifat reflect in our akhlaq. Right?
Behaviors.
And then the law, I would say, is below that as a kind of safety net. So it's the boundary which sets the ballpark. You can do whatever you like. You can play the ball within the boundary, but don't go outside the stadium. That's the law, right? And the thing of it is, you don't play sports on the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But if you're a tightrope walker, you don't walk on the safety net. You walk on the rope. Right? So that rope is the rope of ethics.
Yeah.
Many of us think we need to walk on the safety net, and that's where we've got it's fundamentally wrong.
That's just the margins. Yeah,
those are the margins where if you fall, it holds you and you come back.
But the reason that's interesting, I guess, for your story, so that's your current now reframing of things and how you conceive things. But you obviously, in your background, went from Shariah to the law, I suppose, in having studied Shariah for many years in Syria, and then coming back and becoming an Islamic finance lawyer. Do you want to, if we have time, should we touch on that kind of story, like how and why you did that, and what that was like?
Yeah, look, I think it all came out of a big trauma. It was my trauma response. And I'm going to be open about it.
Can you go into that?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I was not that smart. And I have an older sister who's about a year older than me. Yeah. And she was she was a genius, like born genius. She was beautiful and she was athletic. And I was none of those three things. I'm just after her and I'm like the runt of the litter, right? And so, and I'd overhear my parents, my siblings talking about how I'm such a simpleton. They call me Sida or Shida. In Bangla we say Shida, and in Urdu we say Sida. Right?
Sida is a good thing. Sida is like Sida Sada Admi. He's a straight.
It can be, but when you're a child and you're not understanding the adult conversations, they're laughing at you.
Ali got called that a lot.
Now I'm reframing my whole life here.
Right, sorry to trigger your trauma. All right, should we stop now? Right. Okay. So I, at a very young age, and my dad was super smart. He became Maulana at the age of 17.
Wow.
People used to come for miles to visit the Maulana Sahib with no beard, because at 17 he had no beard. Yeah. He's got a wispy beard like me. So at 17 I had no beard. And he then went into the secular education, went to university, did a master's in Islamic studies. So he he spoke English. He's a polyglot, speaks 5 languages fluently, including Arabic, Farsi, Urdu, English, Bangla. And of course Hindi, so it makes it 6. But Hindi and Urdu are very similar. But anyway, so and my dad had very high expectations of us, and he made that very well known. And he made his disappointment very well known, like a typical Asian dad. Right? So I don't hold it against him. He just did what he thought would be good for us. But I think I had a bit of a childhood chip on my shoulder about this, and I thought I have to prove to the world I'm as smart as my sister, and I'm going to achieve the approbation of my dad. Right. At that young age, right? And so I grafted, I worked really hard, but for the wrong reason, you see, and that's the trauma. If you work that hard for the wrong reason, it traumatizes you. And we see so many traumatized people around the world who are successful, and they've grafted, and they've built businesses, institutions, but they're harming themselves and the people around them. They're not leading godly lives. They're not fulfilling their purpose, and they don't feel fulfilled. If you meet them on their own, they'll, if they're open and able to be vulnerable, they'll tell you how hollow they feel. Yeah. Right. And so that hollowed me out, because I built a shell around me to keep myself safe. And I can remember as a young teenager, thinking, I'm not going to let people hurt me. because I don't care what they say, and I don't care how I feel. I shut out my feelings.
As a teenager?
Yeah, deliberately. And I saw that as a strength. And so people saw me as a really strong person on the outside.
Yeah.
But it comes from a deep weakness, the inability to deal with my own feelings. So I stopped learning how to process my feelings. So that led me to academic and professional success, quote unquote, and even success in studying Sharia, because when I was studying out in Syria, again, I wanted to turn myself into a lean, mean learning machine. That's how, I saw myself as a machine.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can remember when I went to Syria, I would do 2 days of work in one. So I would wake up early in the morning and then study from Fajr until Dhuhr. I can get a good 6 hours of study. That's a solid day of work. And then I'd take a nap, and then I'd do another sort of sometimes 9 hours.
Wow.
And at 9 p.m. I'd be like this, thinking, I wish I didn't need to sleep. I wish I didn't need to. I'm literally treating my body like a machine. And this is wrong, because it's not part of the sunnah. It's not how we're supposed to live. You see.
Yeah.
So so that's how I drove myself. So this drive. And when I first started teaching Arabic, I would drive my students, and they used to see me as a slave driver. And some of them, it led to a lot of outward success in the Arabic. But I also traumatized some people. There was one young lady who in one of my classes just didn't understand something quite simple, and I kept explaining to her. And I thought, I need to be patient with this person, right? Because that's the Islamic ethic. But I didn't see that as a way. I didn't connect that with God. I saw that as something I should do. This is what my parents taught me. And so I tried to be patient with this girl, but I'm not a patient person because I don't embody the Rabbani attribute of sabr. Actually, I'm trying to be patient, but I'm not patient. I'm trying to act patiently, but I'm not patient internally. And so after like an hour or so, it was clear that she wasn't getting it, and I was getting frustrated. That showed in the tone of my voice. And she burst into tears and left. She left. I never saw her again.
Wow.
I saw her again a few times on the street, and she crossed the road and avoided me. And I've never been able to say sorry to that person.
Well, now's your chance. She's here today. No, I'm joking.
No. Well, if you're listening, I'm really sorry, because that's not why I set out to teach Arabic. You see, and I felt gutted. And so, lots of events through my life where, and these are sort of mini crises that eventually led to that big crisis 9 months ago, where everything seemed to be falling apart. And if you lead a life like the devil, one day you'll crash.
Yeah,
that's how I felt. Even it's an extreme thing to say, but if I'm doing the right things for the wrong reason, I'm really reflecting devilish characteristics. That's the reality of it.
Doing the right things for the wrong is that really devilish characteristics?
Yeah,
really?
because it creates delusion.
The intention is not there.
The intention, the essence, the spirit is not there. I'm not really doing it for Allah. I'm doing it to serve my ego. It's self-worship, isn't it?
You're saying some very frightening things right now, Sheikh Salman, because I think a lot of us can really relate to what you're talking about, especially those of us from Asian backgrounds. A lot of our self-worth growing up was linked to our parents' approval and what they thought
and
was.
outward achievement.
Yeah.
Measurable achievements.
Absolutely. And I think, was it only a couple of years ago that you decided to decouple that, what your parents thought of you versus how you thought of yourself and success?
Around
when did
2018,
you
around 2018, that's when I had my big I had several crises along the last few years, right? And I had a big crisis. And I started thinking, but you see, I was trying to DIY it. That's the other thing. I was again still self-reliant. I was thinking, I've studied Shariah. I'm a professional. Everything else in my life that I've succeeded with, I've done with my intellect, my energy, and I'm self-attributing. This is called istighna in Arabic. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَا يَطْغَى أَن رَآهُ اسْتَغْنَى. It's in the Quran. Allah says, man goes astray when he considers himself to be self-reliant, self-sufficient.
Wow.
Right? So then I'm self-reliant and I'm trying to fix myself. And that doesn't work. So this I call the DIY process. I try to DIY it with getting bits of help. But again, when I was accessing help, it's on my terms. I wasn't surrendering to a process or to a teacher. That's really what I needed. And that's really the story of Iblis and Adam alayhi salam. Allah didn't set up Iblis to fail. He wanted to elevate him even further by giving him a teacher, saying, right, in the next part of your journey, is going to be under the guidance of Adam alayhi salam. I've given him nubuwwah. He will elevate you even more. That was what he was set up for. But his pride didn't allow him to do that. He wanted to do it his way. You see? And so whenever we want to do it our way, that's a satanic characteristic. It's not a godly characteristic. The godly characteristic is to surrender to a teacher, which is in Surah Al-Fatiha, actually, by the way. You don't realize this. So we ask
to the straight path.
Guide us. That's the purpose of Surah Al-Fatiha. It's a prayer for guidance. And then you'd expect the answer to be Sirat al-Qur'ani wa Sunnah. Right? So then access the Quran and Sunnah yourself, and that's where you'll find the straight path. That's what we think. But it doesn't say that. It says Sirat al-ladhina an'amta alayhim. The path of those, they're humans who you have previously guided. You've done in'am, right? Of the prophets and the siddiqeen and the shuhada and the salihin. So in our time, we need to search out the salihin, the righteous people who have been guided by their teachers, who've been guided by their teachers all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ, through a chain of isnad, and the isnad is part of our deen. This is undisputed. And that's how we receive that ethic and how we receive that behavioral transformation, through guidance from another individual who's just further along the journey than us. We do this in everything else in life. You've probably got a mentor for something that you think is important to you, right? If you want to be, like, if you want to just sort of, be relatively healthy and flexible, you can just do a bit of stretching at home on YouTube, right? But if you really want to do it well, right? If you want to be an athlete, and spiritually we should all aspire to be athletes. Why are we so ambitious in everything else, right? You guys are clearly ambitious because you've achieved what you've achieved in the dunya, right? And inshallah for the akhirah too, there's ambition. But often we interpret ambition to be about career. What about spiritual ambition? That's the reality, that's the real life. Allah says the akhirah is the real life. Hiya al-hayawan. Hayawan here doesn't mean animal, it means life, right? So what about our mentorship for the real life?
I think so many of us feel that spiritual ambition culminates in one day I'll go to heaven. But is it anything more than that? I suppose, is it more granular than that?
Spiritual ambition is someone who can hold my hand and take me on the journey to the love and knowledge and pleasure of Allah. Knowledge meaning knowing Allah relationally. So that ambition exists in real time, day to day, in every moment. It's not an outcome, it's a process, isn't it? So now an outcome can be motivation, like if somebody wants a six-pack, or they want to do Olympic weightlifting, right? That's an ambition, that's a sort of motivation. But where does it actually happen? It happens each day in the gym.
Your lifestyle will change.
With a trainer.
Right.
If you don't have that trainer, you're fooling yourself. And you're going to injure yourself. You're going to harm yourself.
So the ambition is actually the entire lifestyle shift that would enable you to end up at that end point. That destination. That's
it. And then you'll experience it. The spiritual experiences I've had, again, spiritual experiences are not the purpose. We don't chase them. They come to you as forms of guidance and motivation. Right? So sometimes Allah guides us directly through a dream, or through a vision in wakefulness, or through a person who comes along and says something good or say something bad. Somebody can come along and shout at me and abuse me, but that person was sent by Allah to elevate me, right?
It's hard in the moment to see it that way for a lot of people.
That's it. And that's the meaning of... see, there's a difference between Allah's attribute as-sabr and al-halim. Because both of them feel like people who persevere, forbear. Right? But as-sabr is, Allah is patient with us in the sense that He gives us time. Right? And that goes back to the finance. So how we reflect that, when someone owes us something, we owe Allah so many debts, right? But He doesn't come down hard on us immediately. He gives us the span of our life to pay that debt. So He gives us time. And so that's where the ethic of giving people time who owe us some money. They can't pay, you can have some more time. That's where the ethic comes from. It's theological, right? So that's sabr. The other one is, what was the other one?
Halim.
Al-halim. And al-halim for a human being is someone who regulates their emotion. So I'm angry, but even though I'm angry with that person, I'm not going to externalize that in my behavior. I'm going to use that as an opportunity to direct this situation to Allah.
What alarmed you about Islamic finance? and home financing
That's a good question.
that made you think, I want to come up with something pretty radical and something entirely new?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to frame it in this new framework,
Yeah.
which is, I get the feeling that the Islamic finance industry overall is not framed theologically. Okay. So the purpose for it is not for us to reflect God's attributes in creation. I don't think that's at the forefront of many people within the industry. For some of them it is, and some of the founding fathers it probably was.
I think
great
so.
ulama and scholars it was.
Yes.
But like anything, there's mission creep.
Yeah.
There's been a huge mission creep, and I don't think that's really where most people in the industry are. And that was the case with myself. So I don't blame people, but it's something we need to start rethinking and reframing and going back to the source.
When you say that was the case with yourself, how so?
Because I don't think I guess I had this framework in fragments, but I didn't have it as an integrated system. All right, and so now I feel I can put anything that comes my way into my framework and think about it spiritually, right? But even in the past, I guess I wanted to solve a problem because I think I'm a good problem solver. That's how I can contribute and build my portfolio. It's going back to the transactional way of thinking. So that transactionality actually, without that spiritual connection and framework, can actually lead me and anyone astray. And then it can also lead to utilitarian ways of thinking. In order to achieve that, maybe we can cut a few corners here to get there. Because we want to achieve that as a social purpose or as a political objective.
In my mind, I've always thought about it, and I think Raza's, from his conversation, reflected on it the same way, in that Allah had given you a skill set, which you didn't really understand why you were led in that direction. In my case, it was working with a lot of fintechs through my career in management consulting. In Raza's case, he was an actuary working at the Bank of England. In Ali's case, he was studying law. In your case as well, right? And then there's like a lightning strike inspiration moment, which is, I could use this to better serve people, to better serve the ummah. We see that in this country, 50% of Muslims are living in poverty. Right. That's the famous statistic that came out from Muslim census a couple of years ago. And then you think, how can I use these skills that I didn't understand why Allah had led me down this path? How can I use that to better the ummah? Is that the right framing in your?
Oh, absolutely,
it
is.
Do you think so?
What I'm saying is, see, and again here I'm going to bring us back to the prophetic method, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she has a famous statement where she says that khamr, which is wine, alcohol, and I think it's zina, right? Those two things were forbidden further down. They weren't forbidden at the beginning. They've always been wrong, but in the early days
zina
of Islam,
as well.
I believe so.
Oh, really?
In fact, I'm gonna, because I've got it on my screen. I was looking at it when I.
Yeah, because wine, we know that there's like 3 different occasions.
I'm just gonna double check.
Yeah, sure.
So it says, I'll read the translation. The first of what was revealed was a surah from the Mufassal mentioning paradise and hell. So in the beginning, our purpose and our framing was given in the Meccan period, right? Until the people returned to Islam, as in had Iman and Islam in the practice. And they had the right framework, that's what it's saying. Then the lawful and unlawful was revealed. Then, only then, right? Had the first thing to be revealed, do not drink wine, they would have said, we'll never give up wine. And had it been revealed, do not fornicate, so it is, they would have said, we'll never give it up, right? So Allah with us, out of His mercy and love, He doesn't start with the hardest thing.
He helped us to understand the context first.
That's right.
And then the methodology came later.
Exactly, yeah. So this week, someone's reached out to me, their brother has a very serious addiction, which has destroyed his job. He's lost his job. He's about to lose his wife and kids. People like that can lose their life because people commit suicide in those situations.
Gosh.
Right?
May Allah make it easy
so, in that situation, the last thing I should go and say to him is, "Stop drinking, mate." That's not. You don't start with the hardest thing. I need to reframe his purpose, because when a person's purpose is reframed, they can do those things anyway. I've got a friend who, Rupan, my co-founder at Arabica. From a very young age, mashallah, he had a neighbor, a non-Muslim chap, whose name is Omar now, who was his martial arts trainer. Big black guy, specialist in black belt in four styles of martial art. Yeah, tough guy. So, and he used to teach him martial arts as a kid, as a teenager. All right. And so he just sort of he observed that Rupon has good akhlaq. That's it. He liked him. Good boy. And he was attracted to this. And eventually he became Muslim. And then before he became Muslim, Rupon said, "What's holding you back?" He said, I don't think I can give up the beer and the women. That's what he said. Right? And Rupon said, Allah inspired him with a wise thing at a young age. Like this was like when Rupon was a teenager. He said, don't worry about it. If you believe in God, just focus on that, take the step.
Yeah.
So he did. He took his shahada and he went home and he emptied his own fridge out.
Wow.
Himself. Didn't drink a single time after that. Gave up the women, got married. You see? So when you reframe the purpose of a person, then they will serve God anyway. They'll serve the Shariah anyway, right? So and this is why I'm really emphasizing this, because we could have lots of conversations about Islamic finance today. And a lot of those conversations have been had. Yeah. You've had a conversation with Raza. You're going to have lots of those conversations with other people who either agree with me or disagree with me. Yeah. Right? That's not particularly interesting. Right? It's all been sort of...
It's been done.
You've been there, done that, right? We've all done it.
Yeah.
Okay? But the message I want to put out to the industry is, let's really think, and we've got and you'll be there in a few weeks' time, we've got a Islamic finance retreat yes. where key people in the industry are going to get together over a weekend. We're going to spend the whole weekend together in brotherhood, in collaboration, and that is that's such an important first step. And may Allah bless the people who brought that together, the Riba Free Foundation, Khalil and the others, because that is so important. But what I want to do there, what I'd like us to do there, is actually reframe our purpose as well. Okay? Because, I used to be much more strident in my criticism of Islamic banks and sort of the whole debt-based Islamic finance model. Right? And I'm tired of it. And I'm sure other people are tired of my complaining. and we're all hitting our heads on the wall, right? And I've just decided to stop doing that, because that's not... Because, Allah is an-nafi'. He benefits. And the whole purpose of Sharia is to benefit people. All right. And the fatwa on Islamic finance, whether it's the European Fatwa Council's fatwa from 40, 50 years ago, allowing a conventional mortgage at that time where there was no alternative for a first home, that was to get people out of poverty and to ensure that the Muslim community, so that they're looking at the societal trend. Right? If you project forward 50 years, 100 years, people who have access to home finance and people who don't, and you can see this in longitudinal studies. Right? In the USA, there's a study where, working class communities, one's white, one's black. White people at that time, 100 years ago, had access to finance. Black people didn't, right? Project forward, this community has progressed through home ownership and have become wealthier and therefore have better health, better life expectancy, better outcomes in general, better able to lobby for their needs, whereas this community is still left in the ghetto. Yeah. You see, so when you look at it longitudinally, you see that actually not having access to finance is so damaging to any community that it will actually lead to kufr eventually. Because one of the things that the Prophet ﷺ feared for us was poverty, because it leads to kufr, right? So fundamentally, Islamic finance, and this is, in terms of purpose, we should be focusing on benefit, not on solving specific individual technical problems or issues. That's not where we should be. We're at the long layer of discussion to go above or below, whichever way you think about it, right? And really think fundamentally, what are the needs? And now, again, we need to reframe this. And we've got a problem here. We make a dichotomy between Muslim and non-Muslim. So the Islamic finance industry is here to serve Muslims. What the heck?
No.
Is that why Islam came?
It's for all of mankind.
It's for all of mankind. But at the moment, it's self-serving, right? And we aren't really, we're quite insular. We aren't thinking about benefit overall. So how can we channel the resources we have, including our financial resources, to bring benefit? And that's it. That's the key question, right? And that might lead us into thinking, well, if we're going to establish an Islamic bank, and this is the question I asked to Islamic banks, okay, you've got a banking license, right? I'm not interested in how you structured your products, what boxes you've ticked to make them Sharia compliant. I'm sorry, I'm not interested in that anymore. I'm interested in, okay, what difference, what impact are you having on society? How are you making people's lives better? How are you taking people out of poverty? How are you taking people out of hardship? Because poverty leads to breakdown of health, mental health, breakdown of marriage, children growing up in damp, unhealthy conditions, lifelong health conditions. Overall, it's a disaster, right? How are you are you simply, and I asked this to myself and to Faida and to Raza and Salman, are we just serving people who are wealthy enough to get to pull together a deposit? And we ask this question in our board and exec meetings regularly. How are we helping people who are on universal credit? And I'd like to say, alhamdulillah, we're small, so we can't help everybody, but we have people who are on universal credit.
Raza talked about
and
it,
we knew that at the beginning. It's not something that happened later. We underwrote them knowing that they're going to be on universal credit. And those are, those in a small way, that's how we're reflecting Allah's attribute of an-nafi', the benefactor. Because we're benefiting humanity, right? So, but we're one player. And this is where that retreat is so important. The whole industry needs to collaborate. We need to pull together our resources to ensure that we're all doing this, but also we're doing things that require collaboration. We can't solve this mammoth issue alone. Nobody can.
If you had to give one message to the industry right now about the biggest societal problem that we should be solving, Muslim or otherwise, what do you think that is? Because you said something so interesting, which is that we often think very insularly. We need to help our community, we need to reclaim our narratives, we need to build wealth within our communities. But it sounds like you think that's the completely wrong way to go about that. Absolutely.
Because when Islam came, remember, Islam came and the prophets came to people who are non-Muslim. They didn't preach to Muslims.
That's very true, yeah.
The Sahaba were, that first generation Sahaba were all converts. None of them were born Muslim. Right? And so that's one thing I say to converts, that you have something in common with the Sahaba that I don't. I'm jealous of you in a good way. Right? So we need to really think about, okay, so how was that message delivered? See, our core message is a message that we're here to give and not take, to benefit. Okay? How can we benefit the whole of society and the whole world and be sincere about that? Not because we want something back. And that's what the Prophet said, إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ. We only feed you for the sake of Allah. And the word food has a very broad meaning here. It's not just physical food. It is, but it's also any form of benefit. And in the spiritual world, like if you have a dream of food, the meaning is often something of benefit. So if you see your teacher feeding you, they're giving you spiritual nourishment, you see, or knowledge. Food is knowledge. Okay, so the best thing we can give to them is Allah. That's the best thing that Allah shared with us. So how can we give Allah to humanity through our akhlaq, how we behave? You see, and I'm going to say something that may feel like a spanner in the works for the Islamic finance industry. The big problem for people is poverty, like being able to feed themselves. A lot of people are in food poverty.
They are.
In this country, Muslim, non-Muslim, regardless. And we shouldn't think of them as Muslim, non-Muslim. Even that bifurcation pulled me up on this last week. We shouldn't have this framework. So in that situation, if somebody's dying, you can't really tell them much about God, or you can't tell them about the evils of riba and the ribawi financial system. It's not relevant. Because they don't know where their next meal is going to come from, or they're suffering, or their children are malnourished. We have to solve those basic fundamental problems. So I want to reframe what Islamic finance is about. Islamic finance isn't about Islamic banking or Islamic home finance, even though that's what we set up. Right? It's a small contribution, but that's not the overall big picture. Yeah, and people might be thinking, why am I shooting myself in the foot? Because I have to tell you the truth. Yeah, the Quran says, قُتِلَ الْخَرَّاسُونَ. Dead, literally dead be those who are dishonest, who lie, who hide the truth. Right? I have to tell you the truth. The truth is, we have to solve those fundamental problems. So Islamic finance for me now is, what resources do we have? How can we channel those resources to solve the fundamental problems of society? And that might not be setting up an Islamic home finance company. That might not be setting up an Islamic bank. It might be working within the ribawi framework for a while to solve those fundamental problems. Because when you get people out of that, and that goes back to the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, that we're trying to solve the hardest thing first, whereas actually maybe we've got it upside down.
I never thought I'd hear you say that.
Yeah, this is a very different Sheikh Salman to the one that I spoke to about IFN 2 years ago. But I think it just goes to that point of the reframing. And, it seems that you have had quite an awakening, and one that I think we can all benefit from, far more than we can benefit from the age-old debates about whether home purchase plans are halal or not. I think, as you say, we've kind of been there and done that, and we need to focus on coming together and actually making a difference now, and put our differences aside and just make this work once and for all.
Exactly. And we spoke to Sultan Bey the former CEO of
So
Ryan Bank.
Yeah, now running off.
Exactly. Yeah, and again, we don't see them as competition. We refer people to them. And I might disagree with the way they've technically structured their product. And as I said, that's a boring conversation. I didn't come here to have that. I will not have that conversation anymore because there's more important things. So what we really need to get together is, right, so each of our projects, Kestrl, FIDA, Offer, Stride Up, Orion Bank, whoever, if I've missed anybody, that's not
Nesta,
Wahid,
IFG,
everybody else. Nesta, Wahid, IFG. I'm going to mention all of them.
Yeah.
And if I've missed anybody, I'm sorry. It's just because I can't think of it right now. But every single player, right? What we need to do is really think about, right, how can we collaborate and solve those fundamental problems and channel resources towards those issues. And we need our community to hold us to account, because our community is supporting us as an institution. They're putting their money with us, right? So they're voting. We want them to put more money with us, not because we want to make more money ourselves, to enrich ourselves, but because we want to distribute the wealth that Allah has given us. Because Allah serves His creation. He distributes, right? Everything that we have is given by Allah. And so when Allah appoints us as His representatives, we are here to distribute, not to just arrogate it to ourselves, right? As distributors of the community's wealth, are we pursuing those higher objectives? The community needs to hold us to account. And they need to say, right, if you want us to take money out of our bank accounts and give it to you, what are you doing? How are you doing those things? Or are you just, have you just found a gap in the market that you're exploiting, and you're solving a problem for the Muslim community? Yes, but it's a very small bit. And maybe that's not really the first place where the resources should be allocated, because you don't have an overall community societal strategy. That accountability for all of us together needs to be had with the community.
What advice would you give to us at Kestrl? Given, I think you know what we're doing. We're looking to launch this digital bank in a few weeks' time, inshallah. People are signing up for that in the wait list, which you can go and check out the link now and do that, as well as check out FIDA as well. What advice do you have for us?
My advice to you is do what you do with ihsan. That's the first thing. Because when you do it with ihsan, Allah is al-muhsin, right? So when you do it with ihsan, when you do it well, then you're reflecting Allah's attribute and He will love you. That's the first thing, right? So you do it well. And that means you do everything well. So in your office, you have a good setup. That's ihsan. When you go to the toilet, you leave it better in this better state than you found it. So the prophetic akhlaq is when you meet a person, you go to a place, you leave it better than you found it. And so, what good is it if I'm an Islamic finance founder and I'm solving the problems of the world? Look at me. But when I go to the toilet, I leave it filthy and I leave my mess, leave somebody else to clean it up. You see, so it has to trickle down into the very basics of our akhlaq, right? Or I'll throw something on the ground and expect, oh, there's cleaners. Yeah, but there's cleaners. But that's not the point. The point is you've just messed a piece of the earth up. That's not ihsan. You see, so do what you do well, and may Allah increase your rizq and give you more, so that you can distribute it and do those better things with it.
Sounds similar to the prayer of Sulaiman alayhi salam, where I think his dua was, "Oh Allah, forgive me, but also grant me a kingdom which is, it would be inappropriate for anyone else who comes after me to have that.
And nobody else after me will have that."
Yeah,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. Which seems a little bit odd, but when you think about it, the idea was that he knew that his gift was governance and leading, and he knew how to distribute. And that's why he was asking for something which seems so material and dunya versus
that's right. He found his calling, and each of the prophets had a slightly different calling. The Prophet was offered kingdom. He was offered, if you want to be a king, you can be a king, and he refused. So, and in each of those prophets, we see a calling. And so each of us has a calling. We're searching for our calling. But because it's spiritually connected, it's not because I want it. It's because I want to fulfill my calling. And in that calling, I will reflect Allah's attributes.
I mean, his initial request, of course, was spiritual. It was for forgiveness first. And then he goes on to do the material request, which I always found quite compelling.
That's it. That's it. And so when my teacher has taught me, whenever I'm speaking or giving da'wah or teaching, you start with yourself.
Mm.
So you first give da'wah to yourself. So, and the first da'wah is istighfar. You do istighfar. If you can, you do salat tawbah. Or you do the dua of salatul tawbah. La ilaha illallah al-halim al-kareem. Subhanallah dhil arsh al-azim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. As'aluka mujibati rahmatin. So you do that. You empty yourself. And I'd just like to tell you about an experience I had recently where I felt I was very generous with a person. And they snubbed my generosity and told me, I don't want anything to do with you. And I reacted. It's human reaction. I was emotional about it. I was really angry.
Yeah.
I don't express anger by lashing out and shouting and swearing. Right? My anger expresses itself through thought and sometimes passive aggression.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a professionally angry person sometimes, right?
We're lawyers, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. Right? We do it differently, right? But we can still be angry. We shouldn't deny it. So those raw emotions came out. Yeah. And I felt, I guess, resentful. I thought, how dare he respond to my generosity with that behavior, right?
Yeah.
And then I messaged my wife, and in my message to my wife, I thought, I can't be so crass. I've got to be a bit more spiritual now. So I'm messaging her something a bit more spiritual. And I thought, I'm just lying.
To make yourself feel better.
Yeah, I'm just plastering over my raw
Yeah.
feelings. And so then I just started thinking and connecting it to my framework, right? And made me realize that actually that generosity I thought I showed wasn't mine. It's Allah's generosity, that Allah honored me. This is called karama. Allah honored me to channel through me. And so I'm just a pipe. So this analogy Allah gave me, and again, this is how Allah speaks to us. When earlier I said there's a munajat and a muhadatha, a conversation sometimes we have with Allah. Allah speaks to the prophets directly, but to us He just gives us ilham. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, right? It's in the Quran. So Allah imprints a meaning in our mind or in our heart. And just this meaning of a pipe. And actually there's also a hadith about how the heart of a believer is an aniya, a vessel, which contains Allah, right? Not physically, of course. But when we have a relationship with Him and we achieve His rida, we contain Him in our hearts. Again, I'm not making it theologically.
Yeah.
I'm talking about morally, right? So this thought of a pipe came into my mind. And I realized that a pipe is only useful or valuable if it's empty. If there's something in the pipe, that's a problem.
It's blocking.
It's blocking. It's a blockage. And so if my ego is in the pipe, it's blocked.
Yeah.
I have to get my ego out. And so I just focused on emptying my pipe. And it was such a relief. It was so amazing. I had all my emotions were gone. I had no negative feeling. I just had positivity.
How did you deal with that then, that snubbing? How did you feel about it? How do you feel about it now?
I have no problem with it because I was honored by Allah to deliver His generosity to another person. That's all that matters.
How do you prevent that from becoming what some might call a pushover, or somebody can get taken advantage of? Because I think this characteristic, there have been instances in my life, for example, where I might have been seen to have demonstrated something similar, but then the response is, well, you didn't push hard enough, or you should have. That was not a good situation. Like you can't just be walked over like that. So. Yeah. How do you, it's a fine line, how do you distinguish between the two?
Yeah, so what I'm talking about is an internal attitude,
right?
Not necessarily outward behavior, because I might, so we need to draw boundaries. Without boundaries, we'd all die. Even our skin is a boundary. Without our skin, we'd die, right? Our homes are boundaries, and we have privacy in the home. If people violate that boundary, there needs to be consequences.
Yeah.
We need to defend. If a man is mistreating my wife, I will have ghira, I will stand up for her, right? I shouldn't say, right, okay, I'm just a pipe, and I'm not going to do anything about this. I'm just a pipe. No, that's not how it works, right? Yeah. So what we're talking about is an internal attitude,
right?
But so I might have an outward behavior that to another person might look aggressive, but because I know I'm a pipe and I'm fulfilling the will of, because Allah has attributes that are jalali, there are jamali, beauty, attributes of beauty, and jalali, attributes of majesty and might and power, right? And sometimes we have to reflect those in the circumstances that require them. So long as we don't do those in a self-serving or selfish way or an egotistic way. So the famous example of Ali radiallahu anhu, right. The example where he was in a battle. In the battle, people tried to kill each other.
Yeah.
Right? And so he'd floored his opponent, was about to strike, and the man spat on his face, and then he pulled away. And the man came and said, why have you pulled away? He said, because before I was fighting you to reflect Allah, it's actually not his very words, I'm just framing it. I was fighting you for Allah, as in to reflect in my behavior the attributes of God. But the moment you spat on me, there's now a risk and a danger. Of course, Ali radiallahu anhu was a wali and a sahabi. He probably wouldn't have killed him egotistically, but he saw now a conflict. And so in order not to risk the possibility that it might happen, he pulled away. You see, the wara, this is called scrupulousness. His wara, he's pulled away, which amazed the man. And so here, he's now reframing. He's saying, I need to recalibrate, to reframe myself
sure that
before I do this action.
If I were to do this, it's not for my own ego.
Yeah,
exactly.
it's for the
Not
right
for
reasons.
some vengeance.
Exactly. Now it's possible in that situation, he lets the man go, makes sure he's framed correctly, theologically, morally, and meets the guy in battle again, and the same incident were to happen, and he spits at him again, but now there's no risk it will happen, he could still strike.
Yeah.
Do you see? So that's what that illustrates how we need to constantly be taking moral inventory of ourselves. And this is where that spiritual path I was talking about, where I started 9 months ago. I don't know how long we have, but that has totally changed my life in my behavior, because now every day I'm keeping that spiritual moral inventory under the guidance of a mentor. And I'm checking these incidents in. And even that checking in is such a relief, because now I'm no longer self-reliant. Because I could say, well, I'm a sheikh, or I'm not a sheikh, but people call me sheikh for whatever reason. I've got knowledge, I could do a bit of research and find out the right answer. I know the right answer. I'm just going to self-reliantly do this. But there's a beauty and a humility in surrendering to another person.
Yeah.
And my mentor is actually a good sort of 15 years younger than me.
Wow.
A young guy who's been doing this for 10 years with this sheikh. And somebody asked me recently, how do you find it to have a mentor who's younger than you?
Yeah. That's my immediate thought.
Yeah. And I'd already been thinking about this, because it's hard. You know, I'm sort of, I'm almost 50. I'm 47.
Actually, you wouldn't
and
tell.
I've got a mentor who's like early 30s.
My age, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But I learned so much knowledge and wisdom from him.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing, because that's just what I need. Allah gives you what you need. Allah sent me to a younger mentor because I need to learn humility.
Wow.
I could take that as an affront, in which case I'm reflecting a devilish attribute, or I can embrace that, and then the opportunity for me to rise is so much more.
Wow.
SubhanAllah, I think we are completely out of time.
I think we can all agree that this has been a profound and enlightening, transformative conversation, and not one that I think either of us expected to have.
Not at all. Not at all. And thank you for being so candid with us and with the audience, because we've never had an episode like this.
Yeah, no, it's been genuinely unlike anything that I expected.
I don't know how long we have, but back then, that first week when I had this transformation, I had a dream. It's like literally 4 days after I spoke to that person. I went to that event on the Wednesday evening, met Sheikh Muhammad. He's a student of my Sheikh. And he mentored me in the beginning, and then I've now been handed over to Sheikh Harun, who's more experienced. So that Friday morning I have a dream, and I wake up like, wow, never had a dream like this. And the dream was, I saw myself at the grave of Shaykh Abd al-Jilani. And I'm in my family tradition, we're not sort of that sort of denomination. You know, we don't visit graves generally, and it's not in my psyche. I don't think of myself as sort of visiting graves generally, although it's a good thing. It's part of the Sunnah. The Prophet said visit graves because it reminds you of death. So and then so I see myself at his grave, and my wife is with me, and she sits down and starts doing some adhkar, and then I know that I have to go and do something. I've got a job, got an errand to run. She says, go and do your errand and come back. And that's the end of the dream. And I thought, okay, so I checked, and at the time I didn't know my sheikh. I'd just gone to one event. And so I had a friend who's got a sheikh in America, Sheikh Ismail. So I sent it to him because he interprets dreams, and he said, the dream is beautiful. It's telling you to emulate the akhlaq of Shaykh al-Qadir al-Jilani, who was one of the great legends, masters of spiritual and the outward sciences. He was the master of all the scholars of Baghdad, uncontroversial. So he said, read up on his life. So I started reading up on his life a bit, seeing his behavior. And there's this great story of how when he was a young man, I think maybe 18, 19, he traveled, and his mother had his inheritance, I think 40 gold pieces, which she sewed under his armpit. And then they were robbed in the desert. And then a robber, his mother made him promise, you will always tell the truth.
Oh, no.
And so a robber came up to him and said, "Do you have anything of value?" He said, "Yeah, I've got 40 gold pieces under my armpit." And then he laughed and went off.
Oh, wow.
And then another guy came and said, "Do you have anything of value?" He said, "I've got 40 gold pieces under my armpit." He laughed and went off. And then later the head robber, they told him about it. He was like, "What's it?" So he calls him and says, "Do you have anything of value?" He said, "Yeah, I've got 40 gold pieces under my armpit." So he tore it open and he finds it. He goes, "You could have escaped with your money. Why did you tell me?" He said, "Because I've committed to truth." And then he starts crying.
The robber?
Yeah. The robber starts crying. And he makes tawbah. And then all of his robbers came and said to him, "You've been our leader in robbery, in theft and crime. Now be our leader in the path to Allah."
Wow.
So that, and Shaykh al-Qadir al-Jilani said, "Those were the first people who held my hand and swore to return to Allah, did tawbah in his life."
And he was just a boy.
He's a young man, yeah.
Yeah.
And thousands, if not millions of people through his life found Allah through him. And so what happened to me was, I see the stream on the Friday morning. Next Wednesday, I go to this gathering again. It's called Sacred Compass.
Mm-hmm.
It's on Commercial Road, Wapping High School.
Okay.
Every Wednesday we're there, so I'll be there tonight.
Okay.
Welcome to come.
Okay.
So
Amazing.
7:30 p.m. So next Wednesday I go to the same gathering, my second event, and Sheikh Muhammad, guess what he's talking about? I had no conversation with him.
The story.
No, I can't remember if he gives the story, but the whole talk, beginning to end, is about the akhlaq of Shaykh Abd al-Jilani.
Wow.
And so again, these are bishara, these are good news that
Mhm.
you're in the right place. What you're looking for is here.
Subhanallah.
Oh,
And that idea that you need to go do your errand and come back.
That's me working on myself.
mm.
Yeah.
Which I think has been demonstrable in this very conversation. So, Allah
Well,
Mubarak.
I'm a beginner. I'm a novice on the path, 9 months old.
Would you mentor us?
You're welcome. I started mentoring, so I can give you
Okay.
the initial tasks to do.
Wow, incredible. We're completely out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up there. But Sheikh Salman,
Thank you
it
so
has
much.
been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much. And assalamu
I've learned a
alaikum.
lot. Michael.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for listening to the Muslim Money Talk podcast. If you like what you heard, then please subscribe to Muslim Money Talk wherever you might have been listening to this. Give us a like and share it with someone who you think might be interested. It really, really helps us out. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, and see you next time.